It keeps getting better for Spencer Horwitz in what was expected to be just a call up to see what they have in the AAA prospect. He has turned into a very important piece for the Toronto Blue Jays heading into next season. So we'll break that down and much more in this episode of Jays Digest. Welcome in everybody to Jays Digest. I'm your host Peter Vryonis alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, Spencer Horwitz has been quietly one of the better stories for the Toronto Blue Jays this season. Now, we were wondering what his role was going to be heading into the year with the signatures of Daniel Vogelbach and Joey Votto as well. Like, I know they're not marquee names anymore, and they weren't expected to play a massive role for the Blue Jays, but what they did was provide power from the left-hand side, which was something that a lot of people were wondering if Spencer Horwitz could do. Now, he has answered some of those question marks, and he has answered them in a big way. He's on a pretty nice home run pace right now, despite in limited playing action here. So, is he a second baseman? Is he a first baseman? Where does he fit in defensively with this Blue Jays team going forward? To be honest with you, I don't think it matters one bit because the guy can hit and he is a professional hitter. And we heard all the talk about the roommates heading into the season, about Ernie Clement, about Davis Schneider, about Spencer Horwitz, and he was originally the odd man out. He was the one that had no place on this roster. And now it feels like he's the only one that's going to be a mainstay, or at least the one that's going to be a massive part of the team heading into 2025. And it's very exciting because he's gotten better and better. And you could just tell that he's a seasoned veteran up there in the plate, despite not having been in the majors for too long.
Yeah, you think in back to the start of the season when they signed guys like Daniel Vogelbach, Joey Votto, because they didn't have full faith in Spencer Horwitz to be able to perform at the major league level. He has come out and he started off the season obviously mashing in AAA. He was called up and he has been dominant ever since. He's played himself into a role next season for sure. And Peter, I mean, in September, over the past 2 to 3 weeks, he's been one of the best hitters in baseball. You rewind back to the weekend, he had a home run. He had 2 home runs, a double and a single in the same game. He had a pinch hit home run a couple days ago. He's been absolutely on a tear in the last 24 hours. Now, this doesn't include a last game, but 6 for 7 with 3 home runs, 2 doubles, 5 RBIs, 16 total bases, AL Rookie of the Year. That obviously won't happen, but Peter, we're going to talk about obviously the positional versatility that he kind of lacks a little bit here, but he can hit extremely well. He hit very well in the minors, and the biggest question mark for him and the biggest knock on his game was his power, and he's shown the ability, especially as of late, to tap into that power. And if they think, and they worked with the hitting coaches, Matt Haig, and they figured something out regarding his power, he could be, and he will be, a staple going into next season. And I wouldn't be surprised if he starts opening day next year for the Jays. The question is, where does he start? Because first base, DH, second base, those are his 3 main positions. Maybe they try to get him in another position in the outfield. Who really knows? But they're going to need to sign some more big hitters in the offseason. But adding a guy like Spencer Horwitz, who has an OPS over 800 with a very, very good eye and great bat-to-ball skills, is very impressive, even though his defensive versatility leaves some things to be desired, and it's a little bit not concerning per se, because you'll get him in the lineup either way, but it makes the decision a bit harder where to put him next season.
Right. Now, we take a look at his season here. He's got 12 home runs in 81 games. So if we prorate that to a 162 game season, that's 24 home runs. I don't know about you, Nick, but that's pretty good power for a
Yep.
guy who didn't really have any coming into the major leagues. And then you look at his RBIs, 34 RBIs in the 81 games that he's played. That's 68 over a 162 game season. So some pretty nice round numbers there for Spencer Horwitz. And his OPS plus is at a 128 right now, which is one of the best ever in a rookie season for any Toronto Blue Jays. So he's really exceeded expectations, or maybe he's met expectations because he's no spring chicken. He's 26 years old, right? So he's had
Yep.
a lot of time to season in the minor leagues and just become the player that he is today. There's not much more growth to his game. I think his ceiling is not very high, but his floor is probably the highest of a lot of Blue Jay prospects. And if this is his floor, 800 plus OPS, I think that's pretty good. And I think Blue Jay fans will take it. You spoke about the positional versatility. It's not really a factor with Spencer Horwitz. I like him best at first base. I like him when he is playing first base because I think he's most comfortable there. And for that reason, I think that's why you move Vladdy to third base and just see it. Like, it's not ideal defensively, but you've put yourself in this position now, if you're the Blue Jays front office, to have to kind of prioritize offense over defense because you made such an emphasis on defense, hasn't worked out for you. And now you got to kind of sacrifice that. And Vladdy at third base, I think, gives you the best offensive lineup, even though it leaves a little bit to be desired defensively.
Yeah, and you look at kind of how the landscape of this has changed. You mentioned it. I mean, if they're going for offense, Vladdy at third with Horwitz at first would be something that they've tinkered with a little bit, and they've sprinkled it in this season a little bit. But as you head into the offseason now, the number one priority is getting the offensive powerhouse hitter that they need to get, whether that's Teoscar Hernandez, whether that's bigger guys like Juan Soto, or even guys like Pete Alonso, who is unfortunately a first baseman. I'll ask you, Peter, they still need to add one of those guys. Now, obviously, Teoscar Hernandez is an outfielder. He could work well, but out of the guys who are left, would you still be open to the Blue Jays signing a guy like Pete Alonso, or I'll say for the sake of argument here, DH slash first baseman that adds a lot of power to the team because they need more power, they need more hitting, and a lot of those guys are in the form at this point of first basemen and DHs, but that's an issue for the Jays as well because they have a lot of guys who take up the DH. You can even think about Alejandro Kirk to a degree, who took up the DH spot a lot this year. Obviously, he's the 1A catcher going forward now, so that'll happen less, but they have a bit of a, I don't know if it's a logjam per se, but Horwitz, Vladdy, and then if they add another guy who's a first base and DH, you're getting a little bit tight there, which is why I think they might try to rock him at second base more, even though the opposite has happened this season. He started, when he got called up, he was playing for second base a lot more, and now ever since then, he's barely played second base over the past month or so of the season here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you just want to get the bats in the lineup. I think that's the biggest thing here. And I would be open to Pete Alonso, but then again, like you said, it takes at bats away from George Springer when he's not going to play in the field. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, but you know what I mean. Like, if Vladdy needs some DH days every now and then, you're not going to put Pete Alonso at third base. That's just not a possibility. Like, he is not going to play there. So yeah, it's nice to think about maybe bringing in a full-time DH who you know is probably going to be good for 35 to 40 homers a year. But then I think that causes a lot more problems than it
Yeah.
solves issues in the sense that just defensively you're going to be in shambles. I think Alex Bregman is a guy that I have circled on my radar, but will he leave Houston? I don't know if that's very likely as well because they just win, and he's been a Houston Astro for his entire career. So I don't think he's gonna want to get up and leave out of that situation. So there are some ways that you can address some defensive holes, some offensive holes as well. I just don't know if Pete Alonso um, brings more pros than he does cons to this lineup. I'll never say no to 40 home runs a season, but at the same time, it's very tough to find spots for all of those guys, especially if Horwitz keeps performing the way that he has for the rest of the season. It's gonna force some pretty big decisions on the Blue Jays.
Yeah, it'll be a big question mark going forward, and it's something to keep an eye out as the season comes to a close. Let us know in the comments your thoughts are on that. Do you think that Spencer Horwitz is going to continue and sustain this level of production? Probably not the level of production he's done over the past week or two, but just in general, let us know. We'll see you guys tomorrow.